Hi everyone, welcome to this a new episode of Carolyn Talks, the podcast slash YouTube channel where I, your host Carolyn, speak to film creators about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I am joined by director Marilyn Cooke to speak about her new short film, No Ghosts in the Morgue, which is you would think it's a horror film, but it's not. It's actually, I think, a really interesting film about finding your own path in the most unexpected places, a morgue, for instance. Um, but before we get into the film, I'll ask Marilyn to say a bit about herself and what got her into filmmaking, because, as you know, I like to ask filmmakers like what their path was, because no path, no journey to becoming a filmmaker is ever the same. I've never spoken to anyone who had the exact same journey as anyone else. So Marilyn, thank you so much for joining me today and for being a guest on my podcast and my channel. So can you say a bit about yourself?
For sure. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. So my name is Marilyn Cooke. I am a writer-director. I'm based in Montreal. I'm born also in Montreal. I'm from here, Canada. So yeah, No Ghost in the Morgue is my third short film. I actually, when I was like how I got into film, I actually wanted to become a writer, or like more so a poet when I was younger. I don't know why. I was really attracted to the kind of deep and troubled like life of a poet, and I don't know, there was something there that really spoke to me. I was very melodramatic, I suppose. And then when I was a teenager, I started working in I don't think those still exist, but like a video rental store. Those still exist.
I don't know if there's any more in Toronto, but there's still some back home in Barbados. That's maybe at home. There were still video stores, but in Canada and Toronto, not sure.
Yeah, I know in Montreal either. I don't think so. So yeah, I started working there, and I could rent like films for free because I worked there. And so I just started seeing like a lot of films that probably hadn't really been on my radar before, or that I was just curious about, like all these, foreign films, independent films. And I just started seeing a bunch of stuff that like that really opened my eyes, and I really had this aha moment of like, oh, okay, a film can be art too. So and some of them were like so unusual, and it's like, okay, I can really feel it. Somebody, like, it's one person who wrote this and made this.
Yeah.
Whereas before, like the films that I watched were probably more like commercial, or you feel that they're packaged in a way to be marketed for you, kind of thing. So yeah, and it just opened my eyes, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I really want to be in film, but at the time, I think like there weren't many examples of like already like women directors, and like women of color directors, even less. So, and in my mind, like I just started being really interested in film. So I read like I started reading a lot about film and about like the great directors, and it was always like Kubrick and stuff like that, where you start reading their stories and it's like, wow, they were really like super like decisive and authoritative, and they always knew like what they wanted, and they pushed really hard for what they wanted. And so at the beginning I thought like, oh well, I'm not, that's not me, like I'm not like that, I'm not that that's not in my personality. I'm not a very like firm and authoritative kind of person. So at first I was like, you know what, I think I'd like to stay on the writing path. I'd like to not be a poet, but maybe be a screenwriter, and and then like just try to write for films. That's what I want to do. And so I went to film school. I started writing some short films, and for my first short film that I made, I actually had a writing mentor who told me, who really encouraged me to direct, actually. And she said like that, she wished that she had directed her own films, and she really, really pushed me to do it. And she's like, it really stuck with me what she said to me, because she really said like, it's the worst that you should try, because you're like the only person who has this vision for what you want to do. And yeah, the worst that can happen is that it won't work, or it won't be very good, or you won't like it, and then then what? Like people, that's it, you know. Yeah, at least you'll know. So
Yeah.
but yeah, that's how we got started. And since then, like, made 3 short films, and yeah, this last one has gotten some nice traction, so I'm really happy about it. And I think also I've found my own directing style that's like more like collaborative. You know, I like to, I think I bring a lot of empathy and a lot of listening as well. So it's like I've kind of found my own path through that, you know.
Which is interesting because like the story of No Ghosts in the Morgue is about that. It is about the main character, Keity, finding her own unconventional path to where she wanted to be. It wasn't where she ended up, wasn't where she expected, but is where she felt most comfortable and where she felt she was called to be. And this is working in a morgue as a pathologist, and she started out as a surgery intern, and she just ended up there because she needed basically the credits, I guess you could say. And she needed to clock in like time for her course. And the film, when it started, I was like, is this a horror? Because like there's the name No Ghost in the Morgue, and then like it has this kind of, the way how you film it, it has this kind of like not dark or I would say are even like evil tone, but like for many people, a morgue, you know, or even a funeral home, working in any place with a dead body it invokes fear, or you know, or uneasiness and unsettledness in this. And I think that's because culturally, and especially if you grew up in North America, or like I'm from the Caribbean, from Barbados, and like when it comes to dealing with the dead, like for us it's very, we treat it with a lot of reverence, but then it's also, I think a lot of it has to do with our cultural superstition too, coming like from West African stuff, where you don't know what's going on. You know, like we're accustomed to being around people that are alive, but when it comes to handling dead bodies, it's just like, is this like some kind of superstition, some kind of supernatural entities just gonna start hanging around, you know? And for me, like I've been in morgues. I've been in a mortuary. I was there when my grandmother died, so I saw her body like literally like right after she died, and I stayed with her body until like the morticians came for her body to take her to be examined. And so like I remember so watching the film made me actually think of that experience of like we're just being in my grandmother's bedroom and seeing this person that I knew to be alive for my whole life, and suddenly like all that's left is her body, her soul is gone. And you know, like for the lead character Keity, she has that experience where she's like, she as a surgical intern was accustomed to dealing with patients who are alive, you know, and this is her first time really interacting with them in a medical setting after they've passed on. So for you, I have to ask first, like, what was it about using a morgue to be the setting for a story like this? Because like you would think, okay, like you could have made it a film about your own experience of becoming a filmmaker, but like why a morgue of all places for someone to have their own personal journey to self-discovery?
Well, first of all, I think it's really interesting that you spoke about your own experience with your grandmother, because I think like when we have somebody who is a loved one who passes away like that, I think we do have that kind of feeling of eeriness of like, oh, this, you know, like you said, like we know this person as a living person with their body and their soul, and now it's like just their body, but it's still them in a way, you know. So it's like I just want to say I really connected to what you just said right there. And yeah, so you know, when I also had a personal experience like in that kind of in the same way of like a loved one who passed away. And yeah, and I think it just I also spoke to the person who took care of their body. And yeah, the way that she spoke about not just him, but about like the other people, the other, you know, bodies that she was taking care of, it was done like, and she spoke about them like it's in such a dignified way, Like she would really say like Mr. na 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 like it was like, oh, okay, wow, this is, and it really touched me and it really comforted me. And I really felt like, oh, she, she's really taking care of them as people, even though they are no longer there. Like it's like
Yeah.
you can really feel like to her it was very important, and there was a lot of dignity to what she brought to what she did, I felt. And so yeah, so that really, really stuck with me, and it really started to fascinate me about like what can kind of get you to want to work in that capacity with
Yeah.
with people, um with like, yeah, with deceased bodies, and to bring like such compassion and care to it. That really, really, I think that moment really touched me deeply, and I was
Mhm.
like, I have to do something about, I have to create something around that, because like it was just so incredible to me, like people who work with the dead, like at the morgue. And yeah, when I started researching, I actually found out that a lot of people, we would think, we would have these kind of notions that, oh, somebody who works in those kind of settings would be more like, kind of, I don't know, like creepy, or like they like dark stuff, or they're very, they're into those kind of things. But it's like, no, most, anyway, when I did my research and I spoke to people, there are very normal people.
Mhm.
They're all like, they all have an incredible sense of humor, and yeah, to them it's just, I think it's just a different way of thinking about death, because I think it is true for people in the medical profession that they do view death as like something failed, like the
Yeah.
treatment failed, their what they wanted to do failed, the operation failed. And it's like, yeah, but sometimes people, it was just, people just die too. Like, it's just a normal part of life. And I think that's what I wanted to portray as well, is that, we're all going to, we're all going to pass through this life cycle. So it is something that we should treat with the same dignity and respect as when people are alive and they're going through an illness, or they're going through whatever they're going through. So yeah, I really wanted to, I think it was my way of showing death, but in a way that's like more, like you said, with a lot of reverence,
Mhm.
but also with a bit of humor too, and of lightness, because I don't know, that's just my experience too. But like when my loved one that I spoke about just passed away, there were moments where it was some very funny things happened, and like I remember, like, my family and I, we were just sometimes just laughing, like, so,
Mhm.
because either just remembering things or memories or just funny things that happened. So, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it's,
Yeah.
I, I really feel it's not like, it was also very sad, and it was
Yeah.
very like, I won't, I don't want to gloss that over. There is a lot of grief and everything, but it's not just about, it's like you go through so many emotions, like
Mhm.
that kind of feel conflicting, of like, I feel very sad, but I'm also, there's also this very funny thing happening, and it's kind of dealing with that whole specter of emotions, or that whole spectrum of emotions.
No, I totally get it. Like when my grandmother died, she died the day after my brother's wedding. And the
Wow.
thing, yeah, but she wasn't able to attend the wedding because she was sick for she had cancer and she was sick. And so we were prepared for that. But like I remember but our mom stayed over by her house because we were all taking shifts staying with her at her house. And so it was my mom's time to stay with her. And I remember my mom called us in the morning because it was me and my twin sister were home. This is back home in Barbados. And she called us and she's like, I think she's going. Right. And so like while I'm thinking about my grandmother dying, my sister and I still have to think about mundane things. Get ready, get back, go in the bath, rush in the bath. I was in the bath and it was like, I better not fall down. I hit myself. I hit my own head in the bath, but brushing. And then my sister, I called a taxi, but my mom had the car. So my sister had to hop on her bicycle and pedal across to my grandmother's house. And I was there waiting for the taxi. And then when I got there, and then when I got there, my sister was with our mom in the front house. And so my mom said I got there literally right after she took her last breath. So I didn't see the last breath, but I got there right after. So my mom was in the front house and she couldn't really do anything. And I was the one who had to call they had to call the ambulance and the mortician and just like even in that moment you still have to start thinking about mundane things. You know, you have to call the ambulance, you have to call the police because you have to file the death warrant and all of these stuff, and you have to start thinking about, okay, what will she be buried in? And people like when you watch TV and films, like they don't really show you how quickly these things start to happen. Like it doesn't, you don't have time to process it. It's like instantaneously.
Exactly.
You have to start moving. And that's where and like you said, like we were laughing, like we were still joking. Like my friend Shani came over. I called my friend Shani and say, Shani, I need you to come because my mom can't do anything right now. She's like in tears. And my sister was with her, and my brother was in St. Lucia on his honeymoon, so he couldn't come immediately, right? So
I'm laughing. I don't, it's not funny, but it's like there is
it's funny because like we were laughing. So like, my friend Patrice and her sister Shani, they came and we were like going through stuff, and I just started to look at my grandmother's like like she had like this vanity with all of her brooches and her perfumes. And we were still kind of like finding humor in some things, and because it was like, oh, which paint should I use? And it's like the most mundane thing, and like you, I think it's a coping mechanism, you know. It's like
exactly.
It's a coping mechanism, and like my grandmother's body is there still in the bed waiting to be taken out, like covered with the sheet and everything, but we still had to find the lightness in the moment. And I think your film, you do you kind of you brought that up with the surgeon, the person who carries out the autopsies and stuff. Like he's a jovial person, and he's like saying like we still have to be, you're respectful, but you're not dour, you know, you're not like and I think it's like for him as well, and the way you show in the film is like this is how these people are able to do these jobs, you know, because like this is a way to protect their own mental health. It's a way to help them go through this daily, you know. This is something they have to do, and it's a side of humanity that we don't really talk about, like because for a lot of people we are afraid to talk about death, and we're afraid to talk about the human body after death, you know. And like I've had some like extremely weird experiences too, because I used to volunteer in an ER here, and I've been in the ER when people have coded, you know, and it's this very eerie sense, it's this very eerie feeling that settles over everything. Like everything stops. Like you hear the person, the doctor would come in and do the code call, and like everything stops, you know. But then it has to keep going because the nurses still have patients to tend to. We still have people to process coming through the ER, coming through triage. The paramedics, they have to move on to another case. Like there's no time to really process everything. And that's a part of life that we as human beings, we're I think that's what makes us so amazing as human beings. Like we are able to compartmentalize and process so many things at once. And in this film, like for Keity, she's learning how to process, and she's at first she doesn't know what's going on. Like she gets upset, she gets sick, you know, and it's the smell because like the decaying body smell. And there's this scene, and I think it's a very small scene, but I think it's like one of the most important scenes in the film where like I think it looked like the liver is being taken out and she has to wait. And that moment is kind of poetic because you're thinking after someone has passed on, how much is their life worth with regards to weight? Like this is all this person's body has come down to. Like their liver weighs this amount of ounces, their heart weighs this amount of ounces, you know. And it's just a way to show like there's still we our souls may be gone, but our body still has weight and still has mass to it, you know.
I'm really thrilled that you saw so much in the film, to be honest, because that's something that I really try to do is like even if it's like a short 16-minute film, I really try to like have a lot of layers in there and to have a lot of, and I know not everyone, like you can't see everything on the first viewing, and it's not like I don't know, it's just something that I like to do to like create a very rich kind of world that you feel is kind of exists on its own. So I'm really happy that you saw all of that in it. And yeah, I 100% agree with like everything that you said. I think, you know, I think there used to be a time where, and I it's just I just read a book that like happens in the 1600s, and in the book it's like every chapter it's like there's a couple people who die, and it's like, you know, death is so commonplace back then. It's like, oh, somebody gave birth and she died, and then 2 days later, oh, the baby died too. And then it's like, and the characters are just so matter-of-factly talking about all these people who die. So I feel it's like we're so removed from that now, because a lot of people die in the hospital where we don't see them, or like, old people homes where we don't see it in the moment when they actually pass away. And when it's like most people before, they used to die at home, so um yeah. And I think also people used to die more often. So it's like, okay, so like people live longer now, and they don't die as commonly, like from like, common illnesses or from childbirth as before. So I think we're kind of, there's somehow we're like kind of removed from that, removed from that as a life, that death is part of the life experience, like for us seeing people around us die, and then ultimately us going through that as well. And yeah, I feel that it's like we put it in the hands of professionals now a lot, and just the fact that you could like be at home with your grandmother, like when she passed, like, or that she got to pass at home in her own house, I think is, to me, that's like the perfect way to go. It's like you want to go in your own house surrounded by the people you love, that would be the ultimate goal, I guess. So yeah, the fact that now a lot of times it happens like in a hospital setting, or like, yeah, and then it's like like in the film, I think these are the people who will take care of the deceased people. So I think it's like it's a reality that we're not too accustomed to see, or that we're not really aware of that much. And I think also, like, I actually wrote this film during the pandemic, and I think we kind of got a sense of it more during the pandemic, of like, oh, death is a thing that can happen, and that is happening, and yeah, especially like seeing that that the medical professionals were really like we're just working so hard, and then like having to deal with all these influx of people who died, that that probably it was kind of unprecedented for them. So yeah, I think it was like it was part of a moment kind of thing. I feel like maybe outside of a pandemic, I'm not sure if this film would have had as much impact. I don't know if that's the right word, but like I think it's kind of reflects a time of that time as well, in that way, of like us collectively as humans kind of getting reacquainted with that idea of like, seeing death on such a large scale kind of got us back into that in a way.
No, I agree, because the thing with COVID, because it isolated us, but it also made us become, I think, culturally and socially more connected than we were before, because especially during lockdown, everyone was home. So the only way we had to communicate with the outside was through social media. Like I was talking about that on Twitter earlier today. Social media is what allowed us to reconnect, but it was also a way for, I think, a lot of people to discuss grief in a way that was never discussed culturally before. And also to talk about that, because like people would mention, my cousin passed away, my husband passed away, my wife passed away. And you would see those. And even up until yesterday, I saw someone was talking about their friend who passed away from COVID complications. And I can't remember the person's name, but there's this person that every day they would post deaths of people. They would do like obituaries, like each tweet was like a mini obituary. And the person was doing it as a way to show not only how dangerous COVID is, but how much people it was claiming, but also as a way to acknowledge these people's lives, because they're like, for us, like, unless you know the person, you don't know who has passed on. When you think about it, death is a very personal and also very socially isolated experience. Like, you would go to a funeral, and the only people you would see at the funeral are those who you know and who the person that passed on knew, and your close family members. But outside of that, like, people don't know that this person had died yesterday. Like, everyone's life is still going on. And I think, like, before the pandemic, like, death wasn't a communal experience, but now it kind of is. And I think it's especially, I think particularly something particular to North America, because like in other cultures, like death is a community experience, like a person passed on, they would make it a way for the community. And I say North America, but I mean in a general sense, because in specific subcultures, like in New Orleans, like when someone dies, like they make the funeral and they have the procession down the street. And then there's in other cultural communities, like in I know in Muslim communities, when someone passes on, they usually bury the person, I think, within the next 2 days. But it's a community experience, like everyone comes to and they take part. And it's the same thing, I believe, in Judaism. So unless you were in a particular culture, it's like death is not a community experience. And before, like when someone died, it would be the family members who would look after the body. It would be the family member who would clean the body, who would dress the body, who would prep it. But now we have like morticians, and we have people who specialize in that, and they have to make it there. If they truly care, they would make it about being as personal as possible. As you were saying, it's about respecting not only the person who has passed on, but respecting their family, because the people that are entrusting you with their family member's body have to entrust that you're going to treat it with reverence and respect, that it's not going to be misused. And in the film, like that is, I think for me personally, for Keity, I think that's what made her decide to pursue that career, because she saw the care that was being exhibited towards the people, right? She saw the respect that was being done, and she was like, this is what it may be difficult at first, but I myself can relate to this, and I respect that. I respect the respect that's being shown to the dead.
Exactly. And I think, there's also this sense of, which I find kind of interesting, but when I was doing my research, I saw that, there is this thing in the medical profession of like saving lives, saving lives is the most important thing. And it's like, it's the more, the closer you are in your specialty and your subfield or whatever to saving a life, like the more, I don't want to say prestige, but it's like the more gratifying it's supposed to be. Or, if you think about like a surgeon versus a family doctor, it's like one of them is like saving lives more than the other one, and is more like prestigious in a way, So I find that very interesting too, that it's like, oh, but you're still caring for people, but just in another kind of way, for one. And I think also, sorry, I kind of forgot where I was going with my idea. Give me a couple. Where was I going with that whole thing?
It's okay. That happens to me all the time.
I don't know. I felt like I had a really logical thing to say, and then I just totally.
No, just like you can take your time and think about it.
Hold on. So the medical profession, and I think that I kind of illustrate that in the film too, with the grandmother who is also like this very strong figure, this very strong and silent figure, and who you kind of feel that she must have been a very like incredible woman, to get to Canada like as an immigrant, and to become this very high profile, top of her field surgeon, and to have her daughter, so Keity's mother, do the same thing. And then it's like, so I think there is that sense of pressure too for the character of like, I do want to honor this legacy and like do as they did, and then save lives and be this kind of model citizen. But it's like, but I think like what I read when doing research too is that people, I think when they see their first dead body, I think it's like it's an experience that you kind of remember. Like you can always remember that, because there is something very uncanny about seeing somebody, even if it's somebody you didn't know. I think there's something very jarring for us as humans just to see people, to see like a deceased body. And I think that's the moment for the character where she starts to realize, like, I'm not sure I'm cut out for this, I'm not sure I'm cut out to like this whole saving lives business. It's like too much pressure for me,
It is.
And so like I really wanted to play with that dynamic in the film of like, saving lives versus caring for the deceased. It's just like two sides of the same coin, basically. And it's like one is not more or less necessary and important than the other. That's what I'm trying to say with the film. So some people may disagree,
No,
but I
no,
find
it
it
came
very
through for
important.
me because it's like there's a line that one of the Morgue assistant says where she said for doctors they see with someone dying as losing a battle, and for a lot of people, like for a lot of doctors, like they want to save the life, but it's not necessarily because they care about the patient personally or that they want this person to go back to the family. It's like, this is the challenge. This is, you must live because this is a challenge that must be done. And like you talk about the prestige between like a surgeon or a specialist with a family doctor. And the thought occurred to me is a family doctor is just as important, if not more important than a surgeon, because a family doctor's job is to maintain the life. They're to maintain the health of the person. And surgeons and specialists only come in when there's something that the family doctor can't do. They can't specialize. Like I have MS, I have a family doctor, but my family doctor doesn't specialize in MS, and so I have to go to my neurologist and I have to see specialists who specialize in MS and like I have a neuropsychiatrist that I go to because I have cognitive impairment and that kind of stuff. But my family doctor is still who I go to if I'm not feeling well. My first inclination, unless it's a neurological condition, isn't going to be to go to my neurologist. It's going to be go to my doctor, my family doctor. So while people may look down on family doctors, I'm like, really and truly, honestly, we really wouldn't be able to get much things done medically without a family doctor. Heck, in Canada, you can't even see specialists unless your family doctor refers you.
Yeah. Just to be clear, I wasn't trying to say that like family doctors are not.
No, I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah.
that's how a lot of people look at it. A lot of people, say, oh, you're just a GP, whereas like you're a neurologist or you're a cardiologist. Like there is like a hierarchy, and a lot of people do kind of see that as a difference in status. So like I know you weren't being disrespectful, but that is how a lot of people would kind of look at it. It's kind of like, oh, people will look down on people who are morticians. They might like not say, oh, you're just a mortician. I'm like, no, their job is actually very, very important because they have to look after this person who has passed on, and they have to treat them. And that's a stressful job, like seeing dead bodies every day, touching them, embalming them, dressing them, grooming the bodies for preparing for burial. And they have to, when you have a family, and if there's an open casket, you have to make sure that what the family member sees is the person that they knew. So like that's nothing to look down upon at all. And sometimes they see the most horrific consequences of violent acts. Like they like if you have been, I've known people who like if someone has been in an accident, they can't show the body, and like it's the morticians and the people at the mortuary who have to look at that. They have to confront that where other people don't.
Yeah, and I think like especially pathologists, because like the people that have autopsies are people who've had either like mysterious cause of death that they don't know what the cause of death is, or violent deaths, or so it's like they're not looking at like the people who passed away peacefully in their sleep of like old age. They're looking at the kind of the hard stuff. So and I didn't want to show that too much in the film, I think, because I don't, it's just I'm very you might not believe it, but I'm very sensitive about like seeing gory stuff. It's like I just can't take it. So it's like I can't put that in my own film because I won't be able to watch it.
No, but I actually like that you didn't show that, because I watch a lot of like shows and films about like medical shows and films where they show that kind of stuff. But I like in this film that you didn't show that, because it's not about the gore. It's not about glamorizing or putting the gore on display. Like we didn't need to see the cadaver cut open to know that what they're doing is examining the body. Just the scene where we saw Keity lifting out the organ, that's enough to let us know what is happening.
And it's like
we don't need to see the cracked open chest cavity to know what was going on. So I appreciate that you did that, and it makes sense for the film, is because that's not what the film is about. So we talked about Keity, and you mentioned her grandmother. So I want to talk a bit about that dynamic and that relationship, because you talked about how her grandmother was a surgeon and her mother's a surgeon, and that's the expectation. So like there is also that sense of the film does touch on like cultural expectations, and familial expectations, because like she has this pressure that she thinks she has to measure up to, and she thinks she has to maintain the status of her family to be X accepted within society and within community, because they're still Black women. It's a family of Black professional women. And like and while the film doesn't talk about racism or gender discrimination or anything like that, we as Black women would know that that's something that she faces. So that's a pressure that's on her. So can you talk a bit about that part of the film, and how, while you don't make it explicit in the film, like for anyone who's paying enough attention, that it comes through in, like, especially in the dialogue and Keity's reactions to the phone calls that she gets?
Yeah, well, I really love, and I think a lot of families have this kind of matriarch, of like, and especially I think in, in immigrant families, often the grandmother is like the pillar of the family, and she like holds everybody together. Well, I think it can be true in every type, in every culture, in every family, but yeah, and I think especially in like when you're from an immigrant family, that these people had to work so hard just to get to this country, just getting here was already something, was a feat, in itself. And then that they had to work even harder just to get what people would consider to be a normal life, So I think there is something very interesting there that, that can kind of generate anxiety too, of like, I want to honor what these people, and they say these people, like I want to honor what like my family had to do just in order to get here, and to like, and for me to be able to have this life, But I think it also, like you said, there is also this pressure of like, well, I want to honor the legacy. I want them to be proud of what I'm doing, but I also have a need of to be my own person and to do my own thing. And if I have a call for doing something else, that's not what that's not what my family had in mind. Like, how do I navigate through that, So, and how can I find a way that's like, I'm respecting myself, but I'm also honoring them in my own way, that's maybe not the way that they would have wanted, but like it's kind of finding your own footing in life, So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to portray through that dynamic. And I also find it, I really wanted to have like a grandmother who was a very extraordinary person, in the sense of like, because if she was a great doctor in what was the 70s in Montreal, that this lady, she's
She would
seen
have been
some
through a
shit,
lot.
okay? She's dealt with some shit. It's like you said, it's not explicit, but it's like, to anybody who can, if you just think about it 2 seconds, what kind of, you can kind of guess what kind of things she had to go through. And that, to me, that makes her an even more like, she kind of has an aura around her that's like, you can just, even in her stare, in the way she gazes at her, it's like, it's so powerful that it's kind of too much even, so
it's a lot of pressure, because the way how you have the shots with the grandmother frame, like she's sitting in this garden and she has a posture that's very regal, she's sitting like a queen on her throne, and like the actress that you had to play the grandmother, she doesn't have any dialogue. We hear her speaking, but what we're hearing and what we're seeing are two different events happening at different times. But like Keity's remembering her in the garden, and I'm like, every time that scene happened, I'm like, she looks like a queen, like she could be a queen or a chieftain, or like a village leader or elder. And there's this part sitting there. I'm like, okay, grandma, you have your well-trained parrot sitting on your throne. But it gives this sense of, this is a woman who has had to learn how to be commanding in life. She's a woman who has high expectations of the people in her life. And I love that touch of like, I wanted to know, was she from Haiti? Because it's set in Montreal, so like Montreal has a very big Haitian community. So you said she's from Haiti, right?
Yeah, they're Haitian.
Yeah. So I, being from the Caribbean, I'm just like, I love that we got to see a representative of someone from the Caribbean culture and community, Caribbean community, in that kind of setting. Like she's like not working, like the scene isn't her at home working or just like thing. It's just like, I'm in my space. This is my space. And in the voiceover that you hear her talking to Keity, and then you hear Keity's mother talking, this is a family of women who know who they are, who know what they've been through and who know what they're capable of. So can you talk a bit about the casting? Because the casting for this is very important. Like for the grandmother, she's, as I said, has a very regal posture and bearing. And for Keity, like the actress who plays her, she's very expressive in her eyes, she's fantastic with how she uses her eyes to communicate what she's feeling and what she's experiencing. Like there's the fear and the uncertainty and even like the bit of the grossness, like when she gets grossed out and when she's feeling sick. But then there's that moment of resolution where she tells her mom, yeah, no, I'm gonna do this. She doesn't tell the mom exact, especially what she's doing. She's like, I've made my choice. And like there's that moment of resolution. And I like how you frame that shot because she's standing on the street, like where it's like she has her aha moment. And she has her like but moment, she like, this is the moment I'm gonna stand up and speak for myself. And then she walks off into the shadows. So I want you to talk a bit about casting them and then talking about that specific scene, because I love how you have that scene lit and shot.
Oh, thanks. So casting the grandmother is played by Mireille Métellus, who like she's a very well-known actress in Montreal. She's done a lot of theater, television, film. So when I actually like there was no audition. I was like, if she agrees, it's her. Like there's no other person that I see could like there was no other person in my mind at that moment. So and she accepted the role straight away. So I was very, very, very happy about that. And yeah, she just has this, I find she just naturally has that kind of regal queenly demeanor to her. So I think it's like, to me, it is just a perfect fit. And for Shelby, actually writing the film, I actually had the three of the characters I already kind of knew who I wanted. So like the grandmother, Shelby playing Keity, and then the doctor, Michel Lapierrière, who's also like a well-known actor in Quebec. So I was like, oh, if they agree, I want these three. And so like, yeah, so like for Michel, for the doctor, there was no auditions either. It's like he agreed. So I was like, great. And then for Shelby, yeah, when I was writing it, I had actually met her before, and she was really the person I envisioned when I was writing it. But I was like, I still want her to read, like to have her read just to make sure, because I don't know. Sometimes I just wanted to be sure. I just wanted to be sure. But then, like when she walked into the room at the audition and she started reading, I was like, yeah, no, it's her. Like it's she like you said, I think she's just so incredibly expressive, and a lot of this film is about what happens beneath the surface for her. It's like, because like you said, she doesn't like, there's no explicit dialogue where she actually says, oh, this is how I'm feeling and this is what I'm going to do. It's all very like, she keeps a lot of things inside. So I really thought that she was the perfect fit to kind of capture those moments of like, you can just read on her face what's going on inside her, so yeah. And then for the shot, that the $1 million shot of the of the scene, it's our only exterior scene, by the way. All the rest happens indoors.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me it was like, okay, it was very thought out, like I want this to be the only exterior scene, because I think this is a moment where something kind of clicks and something kind of happens. And also like the only kind of time that we hear her actually speak to either her mother or her grandmother, like because her grandmother is very much in like nonverbal as well. It's a lot about like they look at each other and you kind of feel the communication that's happening between them, but there's no like actual conversation.
Yeah, all the conversation happens in their eyes and their body language and how they look at each other. Yeah,
exactly. So which is what I like to do. So, that's me. But but yeah, and that scene, I was like, I like writing it. I was like, I really see it as like this. I don't know. It's just the way that I saw it was like this kind of light in the darkness, and light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. So that's sort of the kind of metaphor that I was going with. So I really like that you saw my metaphor. I love that. Yeah, because I don't know, maybe I overthink things a lot, so I tend to like have these things that are very like very thought out. So it's like sometimes I I'm not expecting people to see it, but it's all the time. But it's like when somebody does, it's like, oh, you saw it. That's cool. So yeah, and like for me, it was really about her taking that it was really about that decisive moment where she starts to say, like, you know what, I'm going to be my own person. I thought I was going to point A, but I'm going to point like J instead. So it's about being like, you know what, I think I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. So yeah.
Yeah. I know we have to wrap it up because we have another meeting. So thank you so much for taking the time for talking to me, Marilyn. I hope we get to meet in person since you're in Canada too.
For sure. Well, I'll be in Toronto in January, just saying.
Oh,
So.
really? Are you coming? I was trying to figure, is there like a film festival or something?
No, I'm just coming to Toronto. No reason.
I hope we get to meet up.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Thank you so much for taking the time for talking with me. And this film is very interesting, and I hope a lot more people get to see it because I think it has so much. It says so much about not only about death, but also about just like choices and like basically like finding our own path. And like the film, one last thing, the film is titled "No Ghosts in the Morgue," and while the film does talk about it's treating the morgue as a realistic place. Like this is no place for superstition. This is no place for, like believing in ghosts or ghouls or having like creepy ideas about that. The very last shot of the film is this record player turning on by itself. And I was thinking the ghosts aren't in the morgue, the ghosts are in her house. So I'm like, this is where the ghosts are. The ghosts, I'm like, the ghosts are hanging out in her house playing music all by itself. So, but thank you. But I just love that last shot of the music coming on in the record because it's not creepy, but I think it's just a very poignant way to end the film. So, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
If I can just wrap up with that, like I think to me it was just a way of showing that the grandmother is still there in a way, but
spirit is in the house hanging around.
But in a much more like, caring and benign way, like not putting as much pressure and like accepting her path,
Yeah, as the grandmother, I saw it as the grandmother. She's like, I'm not gonna put pressure on you in your profession or in your life. I'm just here. I'm a kind spirit. I'm a supportive spirit. I'm here to
just chilling in the house,
play some music, hanging out in the garden with my parrot. Again, thank you so much for speaking with me, Marilyn.
It was a pleasure.
So everyone, that was another episode of Carolyn Talks, and today I spoke to filmmaker Marilyn Cooke about her new short film, No Ghosts in the Morgue, which is a very interesting, it was, this is something I always say, but I'm so honest about it, where I love where I read the synopsis for a film and I begin it and it turns out to be something completely different than what I was expecting, and it's a happy surprise. And this film is one of those because I was like, is this going to be a creepy film? And no, it's not. It's a very poignant story about self-discovery and following your own path. And like me, as I've spoken about before, like I ended up doing film criticism and journalism at a time in my life where I wasn't expecting to. I was in school to be getting my diploma in paralegal studies, and I got sick, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do something that I know is going to really make me happy and that I've always secretly wanted to do, and then I have the courage to voice, and I ended up doing it. So this is where I am. My path led me to talking to Marilyn about her film. And so it resonated with me about like in that way personally. And so thank you so much for Marilyn for speaking to me today about her film. And I'll be linking the social media accounts for the film in the blog posts on the podcast site, as well as on my YouTube channel and in my social media. And as usual, you can find other episodes of Carolyn Talks on Acast and other podcast streaming platforms. You can find the video version of this on my YouTube channel. I have a new personalized handle, so it'll be youtube.com/the @Carolyn_Hinds. So it'll be // @Carolyn_HINDS. And you'll find all of my video interviews for Carolyn Talks and for the AFCA YouTube channel, as well as my coverage for film festivals, the Toronto International Film Festival, South by Southwest, Sundance, and any interviews that I'll be getting for Real Asian will be posted there. And you can find me on social media, Twitter and Instagram, Carrie CNH. So that's CRIECNH12. You can go to my R3 page. That's r3authory.com/Carolyn Hines and find links to all of my published works. That's written interviews, written film analysis, written op-eds, written write-ups about film festivals, film reviews, of course. And I know they've also had it where you can find links to my podcast and the YouTube channel there as well. And everyone, until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, stay safe.